Dr. Sleep stars Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson and is written and directed by Mike Flanagan. And this movie is the official sequel to Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, The Shining, from 1980, as well as also being the adaptation of the book Dr. Sleep that's based off the original book The Shining, which The Shining book and movie are completely different. So this movie is a sequel to the movie The Shining that is different from the book The Shining, while also being an adaptation of the original book it is so confusing. Nevertheless, I was very excited for this movie because of a few different reasons. I'm a big fan of Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson. I know I'm more of a recent fan of the film The Shining, but I still really love that movie upon first viewing. So hearing that there was a sequel got me excited. I was curious to see what was going to happen in the sequel, because The Shining didn't seem like a movie that needed a sequel. And though it could have worked, I could have seen some possibilities. It had the potential, for me at least, to be one of those sequels that just had to be made to cash in on the success of The Shining. And though I haven't really seen much of Mike Flanagan's work, I did hear that Oculus and Haunting on Hill House was very good. After seeing this movie, I do want to check out his other movies, but hearing things about him, knowing that he is a very respected modern horror director, it got me thinking, okay, so if people are talking positively about this Mike Flanagan guy, it seems like the sequel could be in good hands. But is it in good hands? Well, let's take a look. This film takes place 40 years after the original Shining, where we follow an older Danny Torrance. He's dealing with alcohol, a little bit of drugs because of those traumatic experiences that happened in the Overlooked Hotel in the original movie. While that's happening, these group of, I forgot what they called, there's these group of people that feed off shiners. They feed off the pain of shiners. That's the best way I can put it. And when they find out that there's another little girl out there played by Kylie Curran, I think her name is, they go after her, and Ewan McGregor has to protect her from this cult group, whatever they're called. That's as basic as I can make it without going into spoiler territory. And when the plot was unraveling, I kept thinking to myself, this is very different than the original Shining. And it could throw some people off because, you know, cult stuff is a very iffy subject to get into, not just with horror movies, but with movies in general. But I think it worked. For a sequel that seemed almost impossible to make because of the popularity that The Shining has, the plot of the movie is very investing and very well handled and well written too. And that was a big surprise for me. Though it doesn't copy the original Shining. That's another thing I was surprised about. The plot isn't just another copy and paste of Danny Torrance going insane just like his father did. That's what I was afraid would happen, and thankfully they didn't do that. Ewan McGregor plays the adult Danny Torrance, and I thought that was brilliant casting. I love Ewan McGregor, not just for Star Wars, although he was great in Star Wars. I've seen him in a lot of other movies too, and he's been fantastic in everything I've seen him in. And this is honestly one of his best performances I've seen him give. He is a broken down man because of what happened in The Shining. He's dealing with alcohol, he's dealing with drugs, he's dealing with bar fights in the beginning of the movie, and it's not coming off as cheesy. Because, you know, it could have been done very cheesy, but it's not. It's done kind of sad, actually, because you watch the original Shining and you like this kid Danny. You don't want to see him go through stuff like this. It was very well handled. Rebecca Ferguson is the leader of this group, this cult group, and I freaking love Rebecca Ferguson. Like, I'm not just saying I loved her performance, I love Rebecca Ferguson. Like, I love Rebecca Ferguson. But she is very good in the movie. She was very menacing and a villain you just despised. You know, that's something that was refreshing too. These group of villains, you actually hated them. Like, you didn't want them to succeed in what they were doing. Nowadays, villains are very generic. You know, they got to get something to rule the world or make all people perish. But no, this group of people, they're kind of small scale. They want to kill shiners. They feed off of their pain, and it's weird. It's very weird, but it works. And the villains were very, very good in this movie. Very realistic, although realistic without being, you know, an actual real thing. And something that surprised me was Kylie Curran, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, as the little girl who has the same powers that Danny has. She was very, very good in this movie. You know, I've been hearing that she was good, and I'm like, well, she's a kid actor. Let's just see how it goes, because as much as I hate to say, kid actors, they're very hit and miss, but she was damn good in this movie. Best casting choice, I think, because I don't think... She's very talented, and I don't think any other kid actor could have pulled this off. Maybe they could have, but I thought she was perfect casting. So yeah, it's safe to say that the cast was very well handled and very good in this movie. There's also other cast members that I can't get into without getting into spoiler territory, and I'll just say it was weird to see their characters, but when the overall story, the overall movie was done, I'm glad that they were incorporated into the movie. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, but that's all I'm going to say without giving into spoilers. On to my pros. This movie looks great. This movie doesn't copy the cinematography as The Shining. This movie has a very unique style to it. You know, I can tell Mike Flanagan has a very unique horror style, which was very nice to see. This movie does not rely on jump scares, at least false jump scares. There are jump scares in the movie, but I feel like they're warranted and they're earned. You know, it's not like Danny turns around the corner and then some random character that has nothing to do with the plot just jumps out and says, "Hey," really loudly, and the music does that ding noise, you know? I hate scares like that. It's a cheap way to get your audience scared, and this movie doesn't do that. When it does do that, however, it's in a really tense moment, and that's when jump scares work effectively. And I loved the third act of this movie. This isn't a spoiler. We all knew this was going to happen from the trailers. Danny Torrance does go back to the Overlook Hotel, and that stuff was only in the third act, but my God, was that stuff great. There's fan service all over the place, a lot of recreations from the original Shining that I'm not going to get into fully because of spoilers. And it was all just well handled. And saying recreations isn't a spoiler. We saw a little bit of it in the trailers, so that's not a spoiler giving it away, but that stuff is probably my favorite part of the movie, because though it is fan service-like, and some people are going to look at it and say, oh, this third act is just fan service after fan service to get people to say, oh, look, that's from the original movie. The original movie was really good. Not necessarily. See, all that stuff is in the third act. The first two acts preceding it honestly have nothing to do with The Shining. There's references and callbacks, but just like little minor ones. And the rest of the time, you're invested into these characters. You know, these characters are very fleshed out, and you end up caring about the characters. So when we get to the fan servicey stuff, it feels well earned. It feels nostalgic in a way, a little more nostalgic than just showing it all throughout the movie. You know, it reminded me how The Force Awakens did fan service, though people would disagree with me. That's how I feel. Rogue One did fan service poorly. It's literally just, hey, look at this, hey, look at that, hey, look at this, hey, look at that. This movie did fan service very well, and it could have come off as really bad and even eye-rolly at times, but for me it didn't. For me it was well executed and deserved. Now on to cons. I feel like this movie is gonna pull some people away from it because it's not your average horror movie. There are slow times in the movie. There are times where I was just thinking to myself, what's gonna happen? Like, what's going on here? Like, the pacing does suffer from that a little bit, and this is a 2.5 hour movie. At times it does feel that way because of some of the pacing throughout the movie. But I'm going to add on to that a little bit. Once the overall story is completed, that pacing stuff honestly doesn't bother me. It really doesn't bother me at all because there is a satisfactory payoff by the end of the movie. And that pacing could throw some people off. There was actually a couple that walked out halfway through the movie and never came back because there are times in this movie where nothing really happens. And that's because this movie isn't relying on typical horror stuff. Not even psychological horror like what the original Shining was. This movie is more of a character drama mixed in with disturbing and haunting horror aspects of it. And it's sad to say that modern horror filmgoers don't want to see that. Modern horror filmgoers, they want to see blood, they want to see gore, they want to see a lot of swearing, they want to see intense stuff. And while that's fine, I enjoy some of that stuff too, a lot of those movies just feel disposable, where this one actually feels like we're trying to make a different and unique horror movie that's dealing with real life stuff. Though The Shining thing isn't an actual thing, it's showing in a realistic term as it can what someone who has this could deal with. So though the few parts of pacing did bother me at first, once the overall movie was done, it didn't bother me at all. In fact, it made the feeling a little bit more unique and stand out a bit more than the other horror movies, disposable horror movies we get nowadays. So overall, I love Dr. Sleep. I thought it was a very good, very different and unique horror movie that might throw people off, but I very appreciated the fact that this didn't just go that typical horror route, or it didn't copy and paste the exact story beats that the original Shining did. I'm glad that this movie didn't do that. It was very entertaining to watch at times. And I haven't read the book. I have the book and the original Shining book, but I didn't get a chance to read them before the movie. But a lot of people are saying that this movie does honor the original book as well as the Stanley Kubrick movie. And that's a plus. You know, that's a big plus. If you're a fan of The Shining, whether the book or the movie, this might be right up your alley. Just expect it to be a very different horror movie than what you're used to seeing. Dr. Sleep is an absolute Blu-ray purchase for me. I really want to watch this movie again. I might even go back to the theater and see it because there's just so much that I loved about this and so much that I want to see again to see if maybe I missed some little details. So if you've guys seen Dr. Sleep, let me know what you thought about it in the comment section. And what's your favorite modern horror movie? Whatever your thoughts on all that is, let me know in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, then click right here. And I will see you guys next time.